I woke with a start, my heart hammering against my ribs. The sheets beside me were cold empty. 3:15 in the morning, Julian was gone again. His voice drifted up from downstairs, low, intimate, wrong. I slipped out of bed and crept to the top of the stairs, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. The study door was cracked open, a sliver of light cutting through the darkness. I held my breath and listened. Everything is going according to plan, sweetheart. She already thinks she is losing her mind. 6 months earlier, I would have laughed if someone told me my life would fall apart like this. My name is Eleanor Thorne, though I was Eleanor Sawyer when I first made a name for myself in corporate law. At 34, I had clawed my way to senior associate at Morrison & Klein, one of Manhattan's most prestigious firms. My colleagues respected me. My clients trusted me. I had built my career on being sharp, observant, and above all, in control. That control had been hard-won, earned back after a mistake that nearly destroyed everything I had worked for. The affair with Marcus Klein, one of the founding partners, happened during my 3rd year at the firm. I was 28, ambitious, and stupid enough to believe that what we had was real. Marcus was 20 years older, married, and exactly the kind of man my mother had warned me about. But he made me feel seen in a way no one else had. He promised to leave his wife. He promised we would build a life together. He promised everything and delivered nothing but humiliation when his wife found out and threatened to take him for everything he had. Marcus chose his marriage and his money. I was left to pick up the pieces of my shattered reputation. The whispers followed me through the halls of Morrison & Klein for months. The other associates treated me like I had a contagious disease. The partners looked at me with either pity or contempt. I had worked twice as hard as anyone else just to prove I was more than the woman who slept with her boss. It took 2 years to rebuild my credibility. 2 years of working weekends, taking the cases no one else wanted, winning impossible trials. Slowly, grudgingly, respect returned. My case record became unassailable. Partners who had once avoided me began requesting me for their most important clients. I had learned a brutal lesson about trust, about ambition, about the cost of poor judgment. That was the woman I was when I met Julian Thorne at a charity gala 3 years ago. He was everything Marcus was not. Close to my age, at 36, single, attentive, without being possessive, successful in his own right as an investment banker. He had kind eyes and a warm smile, and when he looked at me, I did not see judgment for my past. I saw acceptance. Our courtship was a whirlwind. 6 months of dinners at restaurants I could barely afford, even on my salary weekends at his parents' estate in Westchester. Long conversations about everything and nothing. He listened when I talked about my cases. He supported my ambition. He never once made me feel like I needed to be anything other than exactly who I was. When he proposed on a beach in the Hamptons, the sun setting behind him, I said yes without hesitation. I thought I had finally found my partner, my equal, the person who would stand beside me through anything. We married in a small ceremony at his parents' estate, just family and close friends. Sarah was my maid of honor, her happiness for me genuine and fierce. "You deserve this, Eleanor," she whispered as she adjusted my veil. "You deserve someone who sees how amazing you are." Chloe came 10 months later, a beautiful surprise that neither of us had planned but both of us wanted desperately. Pregnancy softened me in ways I had not expected. The hard edges I had developed after the Marcus debacle smoothed out. I took maternity leave, something I had never imagined doing, and spent 3 blissful months learning to be a mother. Julian was attentive during those early months, bringing me coffee in bed, changing diapers at 3 in the morning, rocking Chloe to sleep when she had colic. He seemed like the perfect father, the perfect husband. Our life looked like something out of a magazine spread. The brownstone we had bought in Park Slope was the envy of our friends, all exposed brick and restored hardwood floors. Chloe's nursery was a Pinterest dream of soft pastels and handcrafted furniture. But perfection, I was learning, is often just an illusion that hides rot beneath a glossy surface. It started so small, I almost missed it. 3 months after I returned to work, balancing a caseload that would have broken most people while still nursing Chloe. Every evening I began to notice things, little things, inconsequential things, or so I told myself. I would set my briefcase down in the entryway and find it hours later in the kitchen. I would hang my keys on the hook by the door only to discover them missing when I needed to leave for work. Julian would find them for me tucked into the pocket of a coat I had not worn in weeks, or sitting on the bathroom counter, or once inexplicably in the freezer. "You have been so tired, Eleanor," he would say, his voice full of concern. "You are working too hard. Maybe you should cut back on your hours. But I could not cut back. I had 3 major trials coming up, clients who depended on me, a partnership track that required constant vigilance. I was not about to let my career slip again. So I dismissed the incidents as stress, as sleep deprivation, as the normal chaos of being a working mother. Then came the morning I left the stove on. I had made Chloe oatmeal for breakfast, cleaning up while she ate in her high chair, then gotten her dressed and ready for daycare. It was only when Julian called me at work, his voice tight with barely controlled panic, that I realized I had left the burner on high, the empty pot sitting on its smoke, beginning to curl toward the ceiling. "Eleanor, what were you thinking?" His words were sharp enough to cut. "The whole house could have burned down. Chloe could have been hurt." "I am so sorry," I stammered, my face burning with shame, even though none of my colleagues could see me through the phone. "I do not know what happened. I thought I turned it off." "You need to be more careful. This is not just about you anymore. You have a daughter who depends on you." The guilt ate at me for days. I had always prided myself on being meticulous, on never making careless mistakes. But the evidence was undeniable. I had left the stove on. I could have killed my family. 2 weeks later, I found my car keys in the refrigerator. I stood there staring at them, sitting on the shelf, next to the milk condensation forming on the metal. I had no memory of putting them there. None at all. It was as if someone had reached into my brain and deleted 15 minutes of my life. Julian found me standing in front of the open fridge, tears streaming down my face, my hand shaking as I held the cold keys. He wrapped his arms around me, pulling me close, but over his shoulder I caught a glimpse of his face in the reflection of the microwave. There was something in his expression that I could not quite read, something that looked almost like satisfaction. The thought was so disturbing, so disloyal, that I pushed it away immediately. This was Julian, my husband, the father of my child. He loved me. He was worried about me. The stress was making me paranoid. "Maybe you should talk to someone," he suggested, gently stroking my hair. "A therapist. Just to help you manage the stress. There is no shame in it, Eleanor. Lots of people see therapists." I agreed because I was scared. Not of Julian, but of myself. Of what was happening to my mind. I made an appointment with Dr. Patricia Winters, a psychiatrist who specialized in postpartum issues and work-related stress. She was kind and professional, listening to my litany of forgetfulness with a thoughtful expression. "It sounds like you are experiencing significant stress," she said after our first session. "The combination of returning to a high-pressure career while caring for an infant can be overwhelming. Have you considered medication?" I told her I would think about it. The truth was, I did not want medication. I wanted to be myself again, sharp and competent and in control. But that version of me seemed to be slipping further away with each passing day. Chloe's toys began appearing in bizarre places. Her favorite stuffed rabbit, a blue velvet bunny she had received from Julian's mother, Victoria, turned up in the oven one morning when I went to preheat it for breakfast pastries. I stared at it, the blue fabric already beginning to singe from the residual heat, and felt my stomach drop. "How did this get here?" I asked Julian, holding up the rabbit. He frowned, looking genuinely puzzled. "I do not know. Maybe Chloe put it there, or maybe you moved it and forgot." Chloe was 3 years old. She could barely reach the counter, let alone open the oven door. But Julian's explanation was the only one that made sense, because the alternative that I had put it there myself and had no memory of it was too terrifying to contemplate. I asked Chloe about it that evening as I tucked her into bed. "Sweetheart, did you put Bunny in the oven?" She shook her head, her hazel eyes wide. "No, Mommy, I did not touch the oven. You said never to touch the oven because it is hot." "Okay, baby." I kissed her forehead, smoothing her dark curls away from her face. Just checking. But as I left her room, I felt Julian's eyes on me. He was standing in the hallway, arms crossed, watching me with that same unreadable expression. "You need to stop interrogating her," he said quietly. "She is just a child. You are going to give her anxiety." I was not interrogating her. I was just asking a question. "You are projecting your own issues onto her. Maybe Dr. Winters needs to increase your sessions." The words stung because there was a kernel of truth in them. I was feeling increasingly unstable, increasingly unsure of my own mind. Maybe Julian was right. Maybe I was the problem. The emails started arriving 2 weeks later. They came to my work account, always in the middle of the night, always with subject lines that made my blood run cold. "Did you forget again, or did you remember to check on Chloe?" The messages themselves were empty. No body text, just the subject line hanging there like an accusation. I reported them to IT, but the email address was a jumble of numbers and letters sent from an anonymous server. They could not trace it. The IT director, a jovial man named Marcus, not the same Marcus who had broken my heart, suggested someone might have hacked my account. Change your password, he advised. Enable two-factor authentication. That should stop them. But the emails kept coming, slipping past every security measure we put in place. And then came the photographs. The first one appeared in my personal email, the one I used for online shopping and keeping in touch with old friends. The subject line was just a date 3 days prior. I opened it with trembling fingers. It was a photo of me asleep on the couch in our living room. The angle was wrong, taken from above looking down at me. I was lying on my side, my mouth slightly open, one arm flung above my head. I looked vulnerable, unaware. The timestamp on the photo said 2:30 in the afternoon. I had no memory of falling asleep on the couch in the middle of the day. I had no memory of that day at all, actually. I checked my calendar. It had been a Saturday. Julian said he had taken Chloe to the park to give me time to work on a brief. I must have fallen asleep while they were gone. But who had taken the photo? I showed it to Julian that evening after Chloe was in bed. He stared at the image on my phone, his brow furrowing. "This is disturbing," he said finally. "Could someone have hacked your cloud account? Maybe they are pulling old photos. But it is not an old photo. Look at the date. And I am wearing the sweater I just bought last week." Julian zoomed in on the image, studying it. "The angle is strange, like it was taken from the ceiling. Maybe it is photoshopped, someone messing with you." "Who would do that?" He shrugged. "You are a lawyer, Eleanor. You have made enemies, defendants. You have put away people who lost cases to you. This could be someone trying to intimidate you." The explanation made sense. It had to make sense because the alternative was unthinkable. But late that night, after Julian had fallen asleep, I got out of bed and walked through our house, looking at every corner of every room, searching for cameras I knew I would not find. More photos arrived over the next 2 weeks. Me standing in Chloe's doorway at night, just a silhouette backlit by the hallway light. Me staring out the kitchen window, my face blank and distant. Me sitting at my desk in my home office, my head in my hands. Every image was taken from an angle that suggested the photographer was inside our house, watching me during my most private moments. "I am being stalked," I told Julian after the 5th photo arrived. "Someone is in our house." "Eleanor, that is impossible. We have an alarm system. No one can get in without the code. And look at these photos. You are alone in every one. If someone was in the house taking these pictures, where are they hiding? Maybe there are cameras, hidden cameras. We can check if it will make you feel better," he said, but his tone suggested he thought I was being irrational. That weekend, he walked through the entire house with me, examining every smoke detector, every bookshelf, every piece of furniture. We found nothing. "Maybe you are taking these photos yourself," he suggested gently, and forgetting. It could be a kind of dissociation, a stress response. The idea was so absurd that I almost laughed. But I could not because I had no better explanation. And the forgetfulness, the lost time, the objects appearing in places they should not be. All of it pointed to the same terrifying conclusion. Something was wrong with my mind. I increased my sessions with Dr. Winters to twice a week. She listened patiently as I described the photos, the emails, the missing time. She asked questions about my childhood, my relationship with my parents, my marriage to Julian. She prescribed medication, a low-dose antidepressant that was supposed to help with the anxiety. But the medication made me foggy, slower to react. I hated the way it dulled my edge, the sharpness that had always been my greatest asset in court. After 2 weeks, I stopped taking it without telling anyone. Julian noticed immediately. "You seem more agitated," he observed over breakfast one morning. "Are you taking your medication? It makes me feel like I am not myself." "That is just the adjustment period. Dr. Winters said it takes a few weeks to work properly. You need to give it a chance, Eleanor, for Chloe's sake, if not your own." The guilt was a constant weight in my chest. Everything came back to Chloe, to my responsibility as her mother, to the fear that I was failing her in some fundamental way. Then came the night of the laughter. I was taking a bath, trying to ease the tension that seemed permanently lodged between my shoulder blades. The house was quiet, Julian putting Chloe to bed while I had 30 minutes to myself. The water was hot enough to turn my skin pink, and I had just closed my eyes when I heard it. A woman's laugh, high and tinkling like wind chimes in a breeze. It echoed through the house, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I sat up so fast, water sloshed over the edge of the tub. The laugh came again, and this time I could place it. It was coming from downstairs from the kitchen. I grabbed my bathrobe and ran down the hallway, water dripping from my hair, leaving wet footprints on the hardwood. The laugh had stopped, but now I heard something worse, Chloe screaming in terror. I burst into her room to find Julian already there holding Chloe against his chest. They were standing beside her window, which was open wide, the curtains billowing in the cold October wind. Below the window was a 15-foot drop to the concrete patio. Eleanor, Julian's face was white with shock. You left her window open. She could have climbed out. She could have fallen. The room spun. I gripped the doorframe to keep from collapsing. I did not open that window. Julian's expression shifted from shock to something harder. Eleanor, you were the last one in here. I watched you tuck her in not 20 minutes ago. I closed the window. I know I did. I always check it 3 times because I am terrified of her falling. He crossed the room, still holding our sobbing daughter, and placed his hand on my shoulder. His grip was firm, almost painful. You are not well, Eleanor. This is getting dangerous. What if I had not come to check on her? What if she had fallen? I did not do this, I whispered, but even I could hear the doubt in my own voice, because I could not remember. The last 20 minutes were a blur. I remembered running the bath, remembered getting in, but what had happened before that? Had I tucked Chloe in? Had I checked the window? The laughter. What about the laughter I heard? What laughter? Julian's voice was gentle now. The voice you would use with a frightened child or a wounded animal. Eleanor, there was no laughter. You are hearing things now. But I heard it. I heard a woman laughing. He pulled me close, wrapping his free arm around me while still holding Chloe. You are exhausted. You are stressed. Your mind is playing tricks on you. Come on, let me help you back to bed. You need to rest. That night, after Julian had given Chloe a bottle to calm her down and put her back to sleep, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The bathwater had gone cold, forgotten. I could not shake the feeling that something was profoundly wrong, but I could not tell if the wrongness was in my environment or in my own head. The next morning, Julian suggested I take some time off from work. Just a few weeks to get yourself together. The firm will understand. You can use some of your vacation time. I cannot. I have 3 trials starting next month. My clients are depending on me. Eleanor, his voice was firm now, not gentle. You left our daughter's window open. You are having auditory hallucinations. You are not in any state to be representing clients. What if you make a mistake in court? What if you put someone's case at risk because you cannot remember basic facts? The words hit like physical blows because they echoed my own deepest fears. What if I did make a mistake? What if my unreliable memory, my missing time, my confusion led to me failing a client? I had worked so hard to rebuild my reputation after Marcus. I could not afford another scandal, another failure. I called my supervising partner, Daniel Morrison, and requested a leave of absence. He was surprisingly understanding, which only made me feel worse. Of course, Eleanor, take all the time you need. Your health comes first. But I could hear the subtext. He knew something was wrong. They all did. The woman who had been so sharp, so reliable, was now asking for time off because she could not trust her own mind. Julian seemed relieved when I told him. This is the right decision. Now you can focus on getting better. But isolation did not make things better. It made them worse. With nothing to focus on except my own disintegrating mental state, the days blurred together. Julian started working from home more often, ostensibly to support me, but his constant presence felt suffocating. He would appear in doorways when I did not expect him, watching me with those calm hazel eyes that gave nothing away. He made me tea every afternoon, chamomile with honey, insisting it would help me relax. He prepared all our meals, saying I needed to rest. He even took over bath time with Chloe, suggesting that I was too tired to manage it safely. You need to let me help you, he said when I protested. You are not well enough to do everything you used to do. He was right, of course. I was not well. The evidence was overwhelming. But somewhere deep inside me, in a place I was almost afraid to acknowledge, a small voice kept whispering that something was not right. That this was not just stress or postpartum depression or exhaustion. That something else was happening, something deliberate and cruel. I started keeping a journal, writing down everything I did, every moment I could remember, trying to find patterns in the chaos. But when I went to read it a few days later, I found pages ripped out, my handwriting trailing off mid-sentence. In places, whole chunks of time unaccounted for. Did you tear pages out of my journal? I asked Julian. He looked at me with gentle concern. What journal, sweetheart? The one I have been keeping, to track my days. I have not seen any journal, Eleanor. Maybe you misplaced it. It was on my nightstand, and now pages are missing. He sat down beside me on the bed, taking my hands in his. Honey, I think you are getting confused again. I have not touched any journal. Are you sure you were even writing in one? Or could that be another false memory? The doubt crept in, insidious and poisonous. Could I trust anything my mind told me? I looked down at the journal in my lap, at the torn edges where pages had been removed, and wondered if Julian was right. Maybe I had imagined writing those entries. Maybe my grasp on reality was even more tenuous than I thought. My isolation from the outside world became complete. Julian fielded calls from Sarah telling her I was resting and could not come to the phone. When my mother called from Arizona, he spoke to her in soothing tones, assuring her I was fine, just a little under the weather. He even called Dr. Winters and had my appointments switched to video sessions, which he would set up on the computer for me and then hover nearby, making sure I was okay. But I was not okay. I was drowning, and the person I thought was my lifeline was the one holding me under. The realization came slowly creeping up on me over days and weeks until I could no longer deny it. It started with small things. The way Julian's hand would linger on my shoulder just a fraction too long when he walked past, as if he were restraining rather than comforting me. The way his eyes would track my movements through the house, never seeming to blink. The way he would ask me questions about my day, questions that seemed designed to trip me up, to catch me in contradictions. Did you remember to eat lunch today, Eleanor? I would hesitate, trying to remember if I had eaten, and he would shake his head sadly. You did not, did you? I made you a sandwich and left it in the fridge, but it is still there. You need to take better care of yourself. Had he made me a sandwich? I did not remember seeing one. But then again, I did not remember much of anything anymore. One afternoon, while Julian was on a conference call in his study, I snuck into Chloe's room and checked her window. It was locked tight, the kind of lock that required an adult's strength to open. Chloe could not have opened it herself. And I knew with every fiber of my being that I had not left it open that night, which meant Julian had opened it. Julian had staged the whole thing to make me look negligent, to make me doubt myself. The realization should have brought clarity, but instead it brought a new kind of terror. Because if Julian was doing this deliberately, if he was systematically destroying my credibility and my sanity, then I had to figure out why. And more importantly, I had to figure out how to prove it before I lost everything that mattered. That night, after Julian fell asleep, I crept downstairs to his study. I knew his laptop password, had known it since before we were married, when we used to share everything. I opened his computer and began searching through his files, his emails, his browsing history. What I found made me want to vomit. There were emails between Julian and someone named Jess, dozens of them going back 6 months. The early ones were flirtatious, full of inside jokes and suggestive comments, but as I read further, the tone changed. They were planning something, coordinating their efforts. She is starting to doubt herself, Julian had written. A few more weeks, and she will be exactly where we need her. Jess's response was chilling. Good. Make sure you document everything. We need a clear pattern of instability. I scrolled through months of messages, my hands shaking so badly I could barely control the mouse. They had planned this. Every incident, every moment of confusion, every missing object and strange occurrence, it was all deliberate. Julian had been gaslighting me, the term I had learned in law school, psychological manipulation, designed to make the victim question their own sanity. But why? That was the question that burned in my mind as I sat in his study, the blue light of the laptop screen casting shadows across my face. Why would the man I loved, the father of my child, want to destroy me? I kept searching, digging deeper into his files. And then I found it. A document labeled estate planning, buried in a folder marked personal. I opened it and began to read. It was a copy of his parents' trust documents, the legal papers that outlined the Thorne family fortune and how it would be distributed. My eyes scanned the dense legal language, my lawyer's brain automatically parsing the clauses and subclauses. And there it was, the reason for everything. The bulk of the Thorne estate was not going to Julian. It was going to Chloe, to be held in trust until she turned 21. Julian would receive a modest annual stipend, enough to live comfortably, but nowhere near the full fortune. But there was a clause buried deep in the document that changed everything. In the event that the primary beneficiary, Chloe Thorne, is deemed to be in an unsafe environment due to parental unfitness or instability, custody and control of the trust shall pass to the surviving parent or legal guardian. If the mother, Eleanor Thorne, is deemed unfit, custody shall pass to the father, Julian Thorne, who shall have full discretion over the trust assets until the beneficiary reaches majority. My vision blurred with tears. This was it. This was why Julian was trying to destroy me. If he could prove I was mentally unstable, unfit to care for Chloe, he would gain control of his daughter and her massive inheritance. The fortune his parents had denied him would be his after all, just through a different route. I heard a noise behind me and spun around. Julian stood in the doorway of his study, wearing only his pajama pants, his face unreadable in the darkness. Could not sleep, he asked, his voice neutral. I closed the laptop quickly, but we both knew it was too late. He had caught me snooping, and now he knew that I knew. For a long moment, we just stared at each other across the study. The man I had loved had married, had created a child with, had become a stranger. Or perhaps he had always been a stranger, and I had been too blind to see it. So you figured it out, he said, finally leaning against the doorframe. I honestly did not think you had it in you anymore. You have been so out of it lately. You did this, all of it. You have been trying to make me think I am crazy. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Not crazy, Eleanor, just unstable, unfit to care for our daughter. There is a difference. Why the word came out as a whisper. Why he laughed, but it was a bitter sound. Because my parents think I am not good enough for their precious fortune. Because they think a 3-year-old child who still wets the bed deserves their money more than their own son. Because I have spent my entire life being the perfect Thorn heir, and it still was not enough. So you decided to destroy me instead. I decided to take what should have been mine all along. And you, Eleanor, you were the perfect target. A woman with a history of poor judgment, a career built on a shaky foundation, already prone to anxiety and stress. All I had to do was push you a little further, make you doubt yourself, and watch you crumble. I stood up, backing away from him toward the window. You will never get away with this. I will tell people what you have done. Tell who. He moved closer, blocking my path to the door. Your best friend Sarah, who I have been carefully keeping away from you for months. Your therapist, Dr. Winters, who already thinks you are having a breakdown. The partners at your firm, who you abandoned without explanation. Face it, Eleanor, I have already won. Chloe, I will take Chloe and leave. With what money I control all our accounts. Where will you go? And do you really think any court will give you custody when I have months of documented evidence of your instability? The emails you sent yourself, the photos you took, the dangerous situations you created. It is all recorded, all saved, all ready to present to a judge. I felt the wall against my back cold and solid. I had nowhere to run, no one to turn to. He had systematically cut me off from everyone who might have helped me while building an unassailable case against my sanity. But then I remembered something. The one person who knew me better than anyone, who would never believe I was losing my mind. Sarah, I had to get to Sarah. I feigned defeat, letting my shoulders slump. You are right, I cannot fight you. Julian relaxed slightly, his stance softening. I am glad you are being reasonable about this. It does not have to be ugly, Eleanor. You can see Chloe on weekend supervised visits, and I will make sure you are taken care of financially. My parents like you after all. They will insist I provide for you. How generous. He missed the sarcasm in my voice, or chose to ignore it. Get some sleep, he said. Tomorrow we can discuss the logistics. I have already been in touch with a lawyer about the separation. He left the study, and I heard him climb the stairs back to our bedroom. I waited until I heard the door close, then I moved. I grabbed my phone from the charger in the kitchen, thankful that Julian had not thought to take it from me. I typed out a message to Sarah with shaking fingers. I need you. Please come tomorrow morning at 9. Julian leaves for the gym at 8:30. Do not tell me you are coming. Just show up. I will explain everything. I hit send and then deleted the message from my outbox, just in case Julian decided to check my phone. Then I went upstairs and climbed into bed beside my husband, the man who was trying to steal my life, and pretended to sleep. The next morning unfolded like every other morning. Julian made breakfast cheerful and solicitous. He asked me how I slept, told me he had a meeting at the office, and would be home by lunchtime. He kissed Chloe goodbye, ruffling her dark curls. He even kissed me on the forehead, a gesture that now made my skin crawl. Have a good day, he said. Try to rest. The door closed behind him at 8:27. I watched from the window as his Tesla pulled out of the driveway and disappeared down the street. Then I scooped up Chloe and held her tight. We are going to be okay, baby. I whispered into her hair. Mommy is going to fix this. Sarah arrived at 9:03, letting herself in with the spare key I had given her years ago. She took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug. Tell me everything, she said. So I did. I told her about the gaslighting, the deliberate campaign to make me doubt my sanity. The trust fund Julian's confession last night. Sarah listened, her expression growing darker with each revelation. That bastard, she said when I finished. That absolute bastard. But Eleanor, this is good. He confessed to you. That means he is cocky, overconfident. He thinks he has already won. That makes him sloppy. But I have no proof. It is just my word against his, and he has months of documented evidence of my supposed instability. Then we get proof. She pulled out her phone. I know a guy who specializes in surveillance equipment. Tiny cameras, the kind you can hide anywhere. We will set them up in your house, and we will catch Julian in the act. Is not that illegal wiretapping or something? It is your house too, Eleanor. You have every right to record what happens in your own home. And even if it is not admissible in court, it will be enough to convince people that you are telling the truth. Sometimes you just need leverage. I hesitated, thinking about what it would mean to spy on my husband, to record him without his knowledge. But then I thought about Chloe, about losing her, about Julian raising our daughter on a foundation of lies and manipulation. The choice was clear. Okay, I said, let us do it. Sarah made a phone call, speaking in low tones to someone she called Marcus, though not my Marcus. This Marcus dealt in security systems and surveillance equipment, the kind of things private investigators used when they needed to catch cheating spouses or embezzling employees. He arrived 2 hours later, a nondescript man in his 40s, carrying a black duffel bag that looked ordinary enough to pass unnoticed. We need to be smart about this, he said, surveying our living room with a practiced eye. Where does your husband spend most of his time? His study, the kitchen's our bedroom, I answered. And Chloe's room. That is where most of the incidents have happened. Marcus nodded, already pulling tiny devices from his bag. These are the newest generation, pinhole cameras with motion activation and night vision. They store footage directly to a cloud server that only you can access. Battery life is about 3 weeks, and they are small enough to hide almost anywhere. We spent the next 2 hours installing cameras throughout the house, one inside the smoke detector in the kitchen, another tucked into the crown molding in the living room, a third hidden in the bookshelf in Julian's study, positioned to capture his desk and computer. We put one in our bedroom, disguised as part of the alarm clock on my nightstand. And finally, most importantly, we installed one in Chloe's room, hidden inside the butterfly nightlight that she loved. The hardest part was making sure nothing looked disturbed. Julian was observant, detail-oriented. If anything was even slightly out of place, he would notice. Marcus was good, though careful. When he left, he took his duffel bag and any trace that he had been there. Now we wait, Sarah said. Give it a few days. Let Julian think he is still in control. He will get sloppy. What if he does not? What if he suspects? Then we will figure out another way. But Eleanor, you cannot let him see that you know. You have to keep pretending everything is normal. Can you do that? I thought about spending the next few days pretending to be the confused, unstable woman Julian wanted me to be. The thought made me sick, but for Chloe, I could do anything. I can do it. Sarah left through the back door just in case Julian came home early and saw her car. I spent the rest of the morning playing with Chloe, trying to act normal, trying to be present with my daughter, while my mind raced with possibilities and fears. Julian came home at 1 as promised. He was in a good mood, whistling as he came through the door. He had brought lunch from my favorite Thai restaurant, a gesture that would have touched me a week ago, but now felt like more manipulation. I thought you might be hungry, he said, unpacking containers of pad thai and spring rolls. Thank you, that was thoughtful. We ate together at the kitchen table, making small talk about nothing important. Julian told me about his meeting, about a new client he had signed, about the weather forecast for the weekend. I smiled and nodded and pushed my food around my plate, the camera in the smoke detector above us, recording everything. That night, I lay in bed beside Julian, every muscle tense, waiting for him to fall asleep so I could check the camera feeds on my phone. But he seemed restless too, shifting position every few minutes, his breathing never quite evening out into the rhythm of sleep. Can't sleep, I asked finally. Just thinking about work, he said. Big presentation tomorrow. He rolled over and I felt his arm settle around my waist, pulling me close. Once this would have made me feel safe, protected. Now it just felt like being trapped. I must have dozed off eventually because I woke to the sound of the bedroom door closing softly. The clock read 2:47. I grabbed my phone from under my pillow and opened the surveillance app Sarah had installed. The cameras were recording. I could see the empty kitchen illuminated only by the light from the refrigerator. Then Julian appeared in the frame, and I watched with growing horror as he began his performance. He opened the cabinet and removed several plates, holding each one for a moment, as if considering it, then letting it drop to the floor. The crashes echoed through the house, even through my phone's tiny speaker. I had to resist the urge to run downstairs and confront him. Instead, I forced myself to keep watching to record every moment of his cruelty. Julian moved methodically through the kitchen, creating chaos with the precision of an artist. He opened the trash can and dumped its contents across the floor: coffee grounds, eggshells, the remains of our dinner. He scattered it all, then stepped back to survey his work. But he was not finished. He went to the living room, and I switched camera feeds to watch him. He pulled something from his pocket, a small device about the size of a deck of cards. He pressed a button, and even through the phone, I heard it. That laugh. The high tinkling woman's laugh that had haunted me for weeks. It was a recording. He had been playing a recording the whole time, making me think I was hearing things, making me doubt my own senses. The sheer calculated cruelty of it took my breath away. Julian placed the device behind some books on the shelf, positioning it carefully. Then he pulled out his phone and took several photographs of the mess he had created. Evidence, I realized. He was building his case against me, documenting each incident to show the court how unstable I had become. He stood there for a moment, looking around the living room with what I could only describe as satisfaction. Then he headed back upstairs. I quickly closed the app and shoved my phone back under my pillow, arranging myself to look asleep. The bedroom door opened quietly, and Julian slipped back into bed. He settled in beside me, his breathing soon falling into the deep, even rhythm of genuine sleep. I lay there in the darkness, trembling with rage and vindication. I had proof now. Undeniable time-stamped video proof of exactly what Julian was doing to me. In the morning, I played my role perfectly. I went downstairs to make coffee and discovered the mess, letting out a gasp of shock that was only partly feigned. Julian came running, his face arranged in an expression of concern that I now recognized as completely false. "Eleanor, what happened? Did you do this?" I covered my face with my hands, letting genuine tears fall. "I do not know. I do not remember. I do not remember anything." He put his arms around me, making soothing noises, but I could feel the satisfaction radiating from him. He thought he had won another round. He thought I was breaking. "Let me clean this up," he said gently. "Why don't you go lie down? I will bring you some tea." I nodded mutely and went upstairs, but instead of lying down, I locked myself in the bathroom and pulled out my phone. I downloaded the videos from last night, then texted Sarah. "I have it. Everything. He did it all while I was asleep." Her response was immediate. "Do not do anything yet. Let me see the footage. We need to plan this carefully." I sent her the files, then deleted them from my phone, just in case Julian decided to search it. Then I splashed water on my face and went back downstairs to continue my performance. The next 3 days were the longest of my life. Julian continued his campaign, moving Chloe's toys to strange places, hiding my things, playing the concerned husband while systematically destroying any shred of credibility I had left. And I let him documenting everything, building my case. Sarah called me when Julian was at the gym, speaking quickly. "I have been through all the footage. It is damning, Eleanor. But we need more than just the video. We need to understand his full plan, and we need allies." "What kind of allies?" "His parents. Victoria and Richard need to know what their son is doing." I had not spoken to Victoria and Richard Thorne in weeks. Julian had been fielding their calls, telling them I was too unwell to talk. The thought of facing them, of telling them that their son was a monster, filled me with dread. But Sarah was right. We needed them. "I will call them," I said. "Do it today. Julian is getting more aggressive. I am worried about what he might do if he thinks you are catching on." She was right to worry. That very night, Julian escalated in a way that made my blood run cold. I was giving Chloe a bath, something I had insisted on doing despite Julian's protests that I was too tired. Chloe was playing with her rubber ducks, giggling as she made them dive under the bubbles. I was smiling, genuinely relaxed for the first time in days, when Julian appeared in the doorway. "I will take over," he said. "You should rest." "I am fine. We are almost done anyway." "Eleanor, please. You look exhausted. Let me finish up here." There was something in his tone, a hardness under the veneer of concern, that made my instincts scream. I scooped Chloe out of the tub, wrapping her in a towel despite her protests. "I said I will do it," I told him firmly. His jaw tightened, but he stepped aside. "Fine, but you are making this harder than it needs to be." That night, after Chloe was asleep, I checked the camera feed from the bathroom. What I saw made me want to vomit. While I had been putting Chloe in her pajamas, Julian had gone into the bathroom. The camera hidden in the ceiling vent captured him picking up my phone, which I had left on the counter. He had scrolled through my messages, my call history, checking to see who I had been talking to. He was getting suspicious. I had to move faster. The next morning, I waited until Julian left for work. Then I called Victoria Thorne. She answered on the third ring, her voice as crisp and refined as always. Eleanor, how lovely to hear from you. Julian said you have been unwell. Victoria. I need to speak with you and Richard, in person. It is urgent. It is about Julian. There was a pause. Is everything all right, dear? No, everything is very far from all right. Please can I come to the house today? It cannot wait. Another pause longer this time. Come at 2 o'clock. Richard will be home from the club by then. I hung up and immediately felt the weight of what I was about to do. I was going to tell Julian's parents that their son was systematically trying to destroy me, that he was a liar and a manipulator who cared more about money than his own family. They might not believe me, they might side with their son, but I had to try. I spent the morning preparing, downloading all the video files onto a thumb drive, organizing them by date and incident. Sarah came over to watch Chloe and I briefed her on where I was going. If something happens, I said, if Julian comes home and I am not back yet, you call the police. Do you understand? Nothing is going to happen, Sarah said, but I could see the worry in her eyes. Just be careful. The drive to Westchester felt like it took forever. The Thorne estate sat on 5 acres of manicured lawns and gardens, a brick mansion that spoke of old money and older traditions. I had always felt out of place here too, new, too self-made, too much the girl from Queens who had clawed her way up through law school on scholarships and student loans. Victoria met me at the door, elegant in a cream cashmere sweater and pearls. She kissed my cheek, but I could feel her studying me, taking in the dark circles under my eyes, the way my clothes hung looser than they had the last time she saw me. You look thin, Eleanor, she said. Have you been eating? That is not why I am here. She led me to the sitting room where Richard was waiting, a tumbler of scotch, already in his hand despite the early hour. He stood when I entered, ever the gentleman, but his smile was uncertain. Eleanor, good to see you. Julian said you have been having a difficult time. I sat down without waiting for an invitation, setting my purse on the coffee table between us. I need to show you something, but first I need you to promise me you will watch everything before you say anything. Can you do that? Victoria and Richard exchanged a glance. Of course, dear, Victoria said. Whatever this is about, we will listen. I pulled out the thumb drive and handed it to Richard. He looked at it like it might bite him, then walked to the television and connected it to a laptop sitting on the sideboard. The screen flickered to life, and I pressed play on the first video. We watched in silence as Julian systematically destroyed our kitchen at 2 in the morning. Victoria's hand flew to her mouth. Richard's grip on his scotch glass tightened until I thought it might shatter, but neither of them said a word because I had asked them not to. I played video after video. Julian moving Chloe's toys, Julian planting the audio device, Julian rifling through my things, carefully rearranging them to make it look like I had misplaced them. And finally, the audio recording I had made on my phone of his confession in his study, his admission that he was doing all of this deliberately to gain control of Chloe's inheritance. When the last video finished, the sitting room was silent, except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Victoria was crying, silent tears running down her perfectly made-up face. Richard had set down his scotch glass and was gripping the arms of his chair so tightly his knuckles had gone white. I always knew, Richard said, finally, his voice rough. I always knew there was something wrong with Julian. Even as a child, he was calculating, manipulative. He would lie so smoothly, so convincingly, that we would doubt our own memories of events. We tried to correct it. We sent him to therapists, to boarding schools, thinking structure and discipline would fix whatever was broken in him, but it never did. It just taught him to hide it better. Victoria pulled a handkerchief from her sleeve and dabbed at her eyes. We thought marriage would settle him, that having a family, a child, would give him purpose beyond himself. We were wrong. There is something you need to know, Richard said, looking directly at me. Something about the trust. I already know. Julian showed me the documents. If I am deemed unfit, he gets control of Chloe and the money. Richard shook his head. That is not the entire truth. There is another clause, one that Julian apparently did not read carefully enough. If Julian is found to have caused harm to you or Chloe, whether physical or psychological, he is cut out of the trust entirely. Everything goes to you as Chloe's guardian with oversight from the trustees. We put that clause in precisely because we worried about Julian's character. So if we can prove what he has been doing, I said slowly, he gets nothing. Exactly. And after watching these videos, I think we have more than enough proof. Victoria and I will testify. We will revise the trust documents immediately to make sure Julian cannot challenge them. and we will support you in whatever legal action you choose to take. I felt tears prick my eyes, but these were tears of relief. I was not alone. I had allies. And more importantly, I had proof. Thank you, I whispered. No, Eleanor, Victoria said, reaching across to take my hand. Thank you. Thank you for being brave enough to come here to show us the truth about our son. I know it could not have been easy. What will you do now? Richard asked. I am going to talk to a lawyer, and then I am going to make sure Julian never hurts anyone else the way he hurt me. When I got home, Sarah was waiting, Chloe napping on the couch beside her. She took one look at my face and smiled. They believed you. More than that, they are going to help. We spent that evening planning. Sarah had already been doing her own investigating, using her journalistic contacts to dig into Julian's past. What she found was damning. 2 ex-girlfriends who had complained to friends about Julian's controlling behavior, though neither had ever filed formal complaints. A therapist he had seen in college who had noted concerning patterns of manipulation and lack of empathy in her private notes that Sarah should not have been able to access, but had anyway through methods she refused to explain. We are going to bury him, Sarah said with satisfaction. But we have to be smart about it. We need to get Chloe somewhere safe first before Julian realizes what is happening. My parents, I said. In Arizona. Julian does not know, but my mom has been asking me to visit for months. I could say I am taking Chloe to see her grandmother just for a week or 2. By the time Julian realizes it is permanent, the legal paperwork will be filed. Good. Book the flights for tomorrow. I will stay here with you tonight just in case. But Julian did not come home that night. He called at 7 to say he had to work late, a client emergency that required his immediate attention. I did not believe him, but I was grateful for the reprieve. It gave Sarah and me time to pack, to book flights, to set everything in motion. The next morning, I loaded Chloe into my car along with 2 suitcases. Sarah followed in her own car, just in case Julian tried something. We drove to JFK and I kept checking my rearview mirror, expecting to see Julian's Tesla behind us, but the road stayed clear. At the airport, Sarah hugged me tight. You are doing the right thing. Call me when you land. I will, and Sarah, thank you. For believing me. For helping me. I could not have done this without you. That is what best friends are for. Now go, get yourself and Chloe safe. The flight to Phoenix felt like an escape, like I was finally breathing air that was not poisoned with Julian's presence. Chloe slept most of the way, her head on my lap, and I stroked her hair and watched the clouds pass beneath us. My mother met us at the airport, her face creasing with concern when she saw how thin I had become. But she did not ask questions, just pulled me into a hug and whispered that everything would be okay. I stayed in Arizona for a week, long enough for the paperwork to be filed. Sarah coordinated with the lawyer. I had hired a woman named Margaret Chen, who specialized in custody cases involving psychological abuse. Margaret was ruthless and brilliant, exactly what I needed. The petition for emergency custody was filed on a Friday afternoon. It included the video statements from Victoria and Richard, testimony from Sarah and the ex-girlfriends, and a comprehensive psychological evaluation that Margaret had arranged through a colleague. The evidence was overwhelming. Julian was served with the papers at his office. According to Sarah, who had a contact in the building, he had gone white as a sheet. When he read them, then proceeded to destroy his office in a rage that required security to intervene. His true nature, so carefully hidden for so long, finally showed itself in front of witnesses. He called me that night, his voice shaking with barely controlled fury. What did you do? You cannot take my daughter from me. I did not take her, Julian. You lost her when you decided to destroy me instead of loving me. You have no proof of anything. Those videos are fake. You set me up. Then explain them in court. I am sure the judge will be fascinated by your defense. I will fight you, Eleanor. I will take everything you have. I'll make sure you never work as a lawyer again. I will destroy your reputation the same way you are trying to destroy mine. I think you will find that very difficult from prison, I said calmly, though my heart was racing. Because those videos do not just show gaslighting, Julian. They show you tampering with evidence, breaking and entering and creating dangerous situations that put our daughter at risk. Margaret seems to think that adds up to several felony charges. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then in a voice that sent chills down my spine, Julian said, "This is not over." Yes, I said, "It is." I hung up and blocked his number. My hands were shaking, but I felt stronger than I had in months. I was finally fighting back, and I was going to win. The legal proceedings moved faster than I expected. Margaret was a force of nature, filing motion after motion, securing temporary protective orders, building an airtight case. Julian hired his own lawyer, an expensive shark, who tried every trick to discredit the evidence, but the videos were time-stamped and authenticated by multiple experts. There was no way to explain them away. 3 weeks after I filed for emergency custody, Julian made a mistake that sealed his fate. He showed up at my mother's house in Arizona, despite the protective order that explicitly forbade him from contacting me or coming within 500 feet of Chloe or me. My mother called the police, and Julian was arrested in her driveway, screaming that I had stolen his daughter, that I was a liar and a manipulator. The police body cam footage of his meltdown was played in court and destroyed any remaining credibility he might have had. But Julian was not finished. From jail, where he was being held on charges of violating the protective order, he reached out to Jessica Hartley. Jessica, his colleague, the woman whose name had appeared in those text messages Sarah had uncovered. I had suspected she was involved, but I had not had proof, until she showed up to testify on Julian's behalf. Jessica took the stand in a cream-colored suit, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked professional, credible, exactly the kind of witness who could sway a judge. And she proceeded to lie through her teeth. I worked closely with Julian for 3 years, she said, her voice clear and confident. I saw how erratic Eleanor became after Chloe was born. She would call Julian at all hours, screaming about things that made no sense. She accused him of moving her things, of trying to hurt their daughter. Julian was terrified for her mental health. Margaret stood for cross-examination, and I watched as she systematically dismantled Jessica's testimony. Ms. Hartley, how often did you see Eleanor during this period when she was allegedly behaving erratically? Jessica hesitated. Well, I did not see her directly, but Julian told me about it. So you have no first-hand knowledge of Eleanor's alleged erratic behavior. I have what Julian told me. Margaret smiled, and it was not a kind smile. She pulled up a document on the screen behind her. Ms. Hartley, do you recognize these text messages? Jessica's face paled as she looked at the screen. They were the messages Sarah had found, the ones between Jessica and Julian planning the gaslighting campaign in explicit detail. I think we are ready, Jessica had written. The audio device works perfectly. She will think she is going crazy when she hears it. Julian's response, perfect. A few more weeks and I will have full custody and control of the trust. Margaret let the messages hang there for a moment, then turned back to Jessica. Would you like to revise your testimony, Ms. Hartley? Or would you prefer I inform the court that you are committing perjury? Jessica broke. The professional veneer cracked and tears streamed down her face as she admitted everything. She and Julian had been having an affair for over a year. They had planned the entire thing together, coordinating their efforts to make me look unstable so Julian could gain control of the trust. She had even been the one to send some of the anonymous emails trying to make me think I was being stalked. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel, calling for order. Julian's lawyer tried to object, but it was too late. The truth was out, and it was even worse than I had imagined. Jessica was arrested on the spot for conspiracy and perjury. Julian, watching from the defendant's table, seemed to age 10 years in the span of minutes. His carefully constructed facade had crumbled completely, and everyone could see him for exactly what he was. The trial lasted another week, but the outcome was never in doubt. Julian was found guilty on multiple counts: conspiracy to commit fraud, psychological abuse, child endangerment, and violating the protective order. Jessica received a shorter sentence, but was still looking at 2 years in prison. But more importantly, I was awarded full custody of Chloe. The judge's words echoed in my mind long after the verdict. Mr. Thorne, you have demonstrated a complete lack of empathy, a willingness to destroy the mother of your child for financial gain, and a pattern of manipulation that suggests you are a danger to both your ex-wife and your daughter. You will have no contact with Chloe until she is 18 years old and can decide for herself whether she wants a relationship with you. And even then, it will be supervised and contingent on you completing extensive psychological treatment. Julian was led away in handcuffs, and I did not feel triumph. I felt exhausted, relieved, and most of all, free. Victoria and Richard found me in the hallway outside the courtroom. Victoria was crying again, but this time they were tears of both sorrow and relief. We are so sorry, Eleanor, she said. If we had seen this sooner, if we had done more when he was younger, maybe none of this would have happened. You could not have known, I told her. Julian was very good at hiding who he really was. Richard cleared his throat. We have revised the trust as promised. Everything is now structured so that you have full control as Chloe's guardian. Julian is written out entirely, and we have also set up a separate fund for you for everything you have endured. You are still part of this family, Eleanor. You and Chloe both. I thanked them, accepting their embrace, grateful for their support. but also knowing that I needed to build a life that was not dependent on anyone else's money or approval. I needed to stand on my own. 6 months later, I stood in the living room of our new apartment in Manhattan, smaller than the brownstone but filled with light. Chloe was playing on the floor with her blocks humming to herself, happy and secure. The windows were open, letting in the spring breeze, and I could hear the sounds of the city below. I had gone back to work, but at a nonprofit law firm that specialized in helping abuse victims, particularly those facing psychological manipulation. My experiences had given me insight that made me uniquely qualified to help others navigate the legal system and rebuild their lives. The pay was less than half what I had made at Morrison and Klein, but the work felt meaningful in a way corporate law never had. My first client had been a woman named Patricia, whose husband had been doing to her exactly what Julian had done to me. She came to our initial consultation looking broken, defeated, convinced that she was crazy and that no one would believe her. I showed her the recordings I had made of Julian, explained how gaslighting worked, and watched hope return to her eyes. "You are not crazy," I told her, "and I am going to help you prove it." We won her case. Her husband was convicted, and Patricia got full custody of her children. She sent me a thank you card with a photo of her and her kids. All of them smiling, the darkness that had shadowed them finally lifted. I kept that card on my desk, a reminder of why I did this work. Sarah's article about my case had been published in the New York Times Magazine, a long-form piece that detailed psychological abuse in relationships and the legal system's often inadequate response. It won a journalism award and sparked a national conversation about gaslighting, about how abusers weaponize doubt and confusion to maintain control. I had been interviewed on several news programs, sitting in television studios with too much makeup and too bright lights, telling my story over and over. It was exhausting, but it was also necessary. Every time I spoke, I received messages from other women who recognized themselves in my story, who finally understood that they were not crazy, that they were being abused, that there was a way out. I had become somewhat reluctantly a public face for psychological abuse awareness. Lawyers started referring cases to me. Organizations asked me to speak at conferences. Law schools invited me to lecture on recognizing and prosecuting gaslighting. It was overwhelming, sometimes balancing motherhood and work and this unexpected advocacy role, but it also felt like my life had purpose in a way it never had before. Julian wrote to me from prison once, a letter that arrived 6 months after his sentencing. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was not an apology. Julian was incapable of genuine apology, of taking responsibility for his actions. Instead, it was a rambling justification of everything he had done, blaming his parents for not loving him enough, blaming me for not being understanding enough, blaming the legal system for not seeing his side of things. He signed it with, "You will always be the one who destroyed this family." I burned the letter in the kitchen sink and washed the ashes down the drain. Julian would never understand what he had done, would never see himself as anything other than the victim. But that was no longer my problem. Eleanor, Chloe called out from the living room. "Look what I made." I walked over and knelt beside her. She had built a tower of blocks taller than any she had made before, more complex and stable. "That is beautiful, sweetheart. You did such a good job." She beamed at me, and I felt my heart swell. This was what mattered. Not the brownstone or the money or the prestige. Just this. Chloe safe and happy. Me finally free. I thought about Julian, sometimes locked away in prison, probably still convinced that he was the victim, that I had somehow wronged him. But I did not waste much energy on those thoughts. He had lost everything, his freedom, his reputation, his daughter, because of his own choices. The trust fund he had schemed for was gone. The life he had tried to steal from me was ashes, and I had survived. As for me, I no longer second-guessed every decision or wondered if I could trust my own mind. I no longer felt like I was walking on eggshells waiting for the next shoe to drop. I was free, truly free, and I would never take that for granted again. That evening, after I put Chloe to bed, I stood at the window, looking out over the city. Somewhere out there were other women like me, trapped in relationships with men like Julian, doubting themselves, feeling alone. I thought about them as I sipped my tea, and I made a silent promise. I would use my voice, my platform, my experience to help them find their way out. To show them that they were not crazy, that their instincts were right, that there was a path forward. I turned away from the window and picked up my laptop. I had a case to prepare for tomorrow, a woman whose husband had been doing to her exactly what Julian had done to me. But this time the outcome would be different. This time she had an advocate who understood, who believed her, who would fight for her. I began to type, the familiar rhythm of legal writing steadying me, grounding me. Outside, the city hummed with life, full of possibility and promise. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. I had walked through fire and emerged on the other side scarred, but stronger, wounded, but whole. I had reclaimed my life, my daughter, my future. Julian had tried to break me, but instead he had forged me into something harder, something unbreakable. And now I would spend the rest of my life making sure that no one else had to fight alone the way I had. The cursor blinked on my screen, waiting. I smiled and kept writing. This was my life now, and it was exactly where I was meant to be.